Hello everyone, my name's Lorraine and I am the founder of Intrepid English. Thank you very much for joining me today. It's this morning here in Scotland in the UK. Thank you very much for joining us. This is a first for me. This is the first time I'm doing a live on Facebook. So if you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. If I don't get to them all during the course of this live, then I will get back to you later. So let's get started. Today we're going to talk about reported speech, which is a very common and very important part of English grammar. Reported speech, if you don't know already, is sometimes called indirect speech, and we use it to tell somebody about a conversation that we've had or a conversation that we heard. Maybe it's to tell somebody about what somebody said, to quote somebody, and there are two ways of doing this. So I'll go through some slides with you today, and if you have any questions about the grammar or about any of the vocabulary, please feel free to ask me. So today's event is to show you a little bit of what you can expect in the Intrepid English Academy course about reported speech, which was written by the lovely Intrepid English teacher Kate. So that became live on the 10th of April. And already we've had several students tell us how great the course is. So if you want to have a look, please go to the Intrepid English Academy at intrepidenglish.co.uk. Right, let's get started. Reported speech. This is very common, very important area of English grammar. And it's important that you understand that whatever verb tense was used in the original speech, okay, the direct speech, we need to move that tense back. On the left-hand side, you can see the verb tenses that people use when they are speaking in normal conversation. Sometimes we call this original, or sometimes it's called direct. On the right-hand side, you can see the verb tenses that we use to report what somebody said. We call this reported or indirect speech. We use those terms interchangeably. So the original statement might happen in the simple present. For example, I live in Edinburgh. But if somebody is talking about that conversation later and they want to refer back to that statement, they would use the simple past to report that statement. It would become, she said she lived in Edinburgh. Now, there is an exception and I'll get to that later, but for now, let's take a look at the original verb tense and how we transform that into the reported speech. Present continuous becomes past continuous. Simple past becomes past perfect. Past continuous becomes past perfect continuous. Present perfect becomes past perfect. Present perfect continuous becomes past perfect continuous. Past perfect becomes past perfect, so it doesn't change. Again, past perfect continuous does not change. It stays as past perfect continuous, and I'll explain that in a moment. The future of will turns to the future with would. Okay, so will becomes would. Won't, the negative future, becomes wouldn't. May becomes might, can becomes could, should and must stay the same. But have to turns to had to. I know that seems like a lot to remember, but try to imagine it as when we're talking in the present tense, in normal conversation, If we were to report that speech later, of course we would move it back to the past because the conversation happened earlier. However, if we are reporting a conversation which used a past tense, we can't go back any further. We can use the same tense but make some other small changes so that it's clear we are reporting a previous conversation. Okay, this is really good reference, so it might be worth taking a screenshot. Alternatively, you can find these cheat sheets on our social media accounts. We've already posted this particular image on the Facebook group that you're a part of. We post a lot of cheat sheets on our social media channels: Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter, Facebook. We have videos on YouTube as well. So you can find these handy cheat sheets everywhere. Alternatively, they'll always be on the Intrepid English website as well. Right. If you are using an expression of time and place, then we need to change those a little bit in our reported speech. If the original statement is now, the reported statement would be then. Today becomes that day. Tonight becomes that night. Here is there. This is that. These are those. Yesterday becomes the day before or the previous day. Last week, month, year, summer becomes the week, month, year, summer before. 2 minutes or 1 hour or 3 days ago becomes 2 minutes or 1 hour or 3 days before. So obviously you need to use that in relation to another action, okay, to make that make sense. Tomorrow becomes the next day or the following day. This Saturday or this weekend or this month would become that Saturday or weekend or month. And finally, next week or next Thursday or next year. Now that could change to the week, the Thursday, the year after, or we could say the following week, the following Thursday, the following year. Of course, these are just some of them. You can change the days of the week, the season here. You can change several things to make it fit the context. But remember to stay in line with the sequence of tenses that I showed you on the previous slide. Okay, we're going to get some examples in just a second. I know that's a lot to take in, but hopefully you've made some screenshots of these two slides so that you can keep coming back to them in future while you are trying to create reported speech statements or questions. Okay, now there are two main verbs that we use with reported speech, and they are say and tell. And there is a difference between these two. It can be quite confusing for English learners. We often have this question, what's the difference between say and tell? Well, when we use the verb say, or said in the past, we do not need a listener. You can just say something, you can say it aloud. I'm saying it now, I don't even know who's listening to this, but I'm saying something. With tell, or told in the past, you need to have a listener there, okay? You can tell somebody something, but you can say something. Okay, for example, original statement here, my sister lives in New York. The reported statement would be, he said that his sister lived in New York. Now you don't have to say that. You can say, he said his sister lived in New York. And with tell or told, the original statement could be, Italian food is my favourite type of food. The reported statement would be, he told me that Italian food was his favourite type of food. Again, you don't need to say that. It works perfectly well without that. I hope you can see here in the say example sentence, he's just saying it. We don't know who he's talking to. But when we say tell, we want to know who he's talking to. In this case, it's me. He told me that Italian food was his favourite type of food. Okay, so when should we use that and when shouldn't we use that? Well, some people believe that adding the word that can make it a little bit more formal. In my opinion, it really depends on the words before and after it. If I'm going to use the word those, for example, I'd probably leave that out. He told me that those pens belong to him. It's a bit repetitive. So I would probably say, he told me those pens belong to him. Okay, but it's up to you. You can say it either way. Okay, moving on to the next slide. Let's take a look at some examples where we're moving back a tense. Right, so earlier I mentioned to you that the simple present tense in direct speech becomes the simple past in reported speech. Here are some examples. I like Mexican food. I don't eat meat. If we were reporting that conversation to somebody else later, we would say, she told me she liked Mexican food. She said she didn't eat meat. Okay. The present continuous, for example, he is playing football in the garden, is then transformed to the past continuous. He said he was playing football in the garden. Now, I'd like to mention something which confuses some English learners, and that is when the verb tense doesn't change. Okay, for example, some people, if the situation stays the same, like to continue with the same verb tense. That gets a little bit confusing. I'll explain it to you now, but just for clarity, I won't explore that part further today. If the conversation, the direct speech said, I like Mexican food, and the person speaking is there and still likes Mexican food, you could say, she told me she likes Mexican food. Interesting. Like with the subject I does not have an S on the end. I like. Now, because she still likes Mexican food, you would only change the S on the end there. So she told me she likes Mexican food. Or she told me she liked Mexican food. Both are fine, but it only is acceptable if the thing that you're talking about is still true. Okay? For example, if Bob and Mary were having a discussion and Bob told Mary, I don't eat meat. I could tell somebody the next day, Bob said he didn't eat meat. Or I could say, Bob said he doesn't eat meat. So the verb is conjugated because now I'm talking about he rather than I, but it's not in the past form because it's still true. Now that's a little bit difficult for some people to understand. So now that I've explained that exception, I'll move on, continuing to use the sequence of tenses because that's much easier for people to understand. And when you feel like you're comfortable using it in this way, then you can start to explore the exceptions. Okay. So now let's move on to expressions of time and place. If your direct speech includes the phrases now, today, tonight, here, this and these, in reported speech you could use then, that day, that night, there, that and those, respectively. So when I say respectively, I mean now and then are paired. You can see them both here in white. Today and that day are paired. You can see them both here in blue. So the word respectively means in the same order as the other list. Okay, let's think of some examples, shall we? I'd like to leave now. She said she wanted to leave then. I'm having such a great day today. She was having such a great day that day. Are you going to the party tonight? She asked him if he was going to the party that night. Are they here yet? He asked her if they were there yet. Now that's an interesting one. That is called an embedded question. We'll look at embedded questions in another live event. So please sign up to our newsletter so that you don't miss out on any of these grammar tutorials. This is your bag. He told her that it was her bag. Now, with the word that, I can choose to use two that's. He told her that was her bag. But here I've chosen not to use that because it would be repetitive. He told her that was her bag. Are these your glasses? She asked him if those were his glasses. Now, what happens if your direct sentence is in the past simple? Well, then we transform it to the past perfect. Here are some examples. She went to a party last night. They said they had gone to a party the previous night. He didn't attend the meeting. She told me that he hadn't attended the meeting. The past continuous is transformed to the past perfect continuous. She was playing cards with her parents. She said she had been playing cards with her parents. Now, this is where some students find it difficult because you have she said. Said is a main verb there. She had been playing, okay? Had and been are auxiliary verbs which are used to create the past perfect. Then playing is another main verb, okay? So remember, with continuous tenses, we need ing on the main verb. With perfect tenses, we need have or have been, or a variation of that. She said is the first part to describe the action. She said she had been playing cards with her parents. So there's a few things to take into account there. This one takes more practice than most of the other ones, in my opinion. So keep practicing it, keep making your own sentences, and eventually it will start to feel much more natural. Here are some expressions of time and place in the past. So these are just some of them, not all of them, but these are probably the most common ones. Yesterday turns to the day before or the previous day. 2 days, 3 weeks, 1 year ago becomes 2 days, 3 weeks, 1 year before. Last Monday, or last weekend, or last class, for example, becomes the Monday before, the weekend before, or the class before. Okay. So remember, ago or last can include before when you're transforming it into the previous tense for reported speech. Some more sequence of tenses here, reported perfect tenses. So we've had a look at some simple past and some past perfect continuous. Now let's have a look at present perfect and present perfect continuous, which becomes past perfect and past perfect continuous. So we're just shifting it back a whole tense. For example, I have lived here for 3 months. becomes she said she had lived there for 3 months. So notice what's changed here. She had lived there. So have in the present perfect becomes had in the past perfect. Lived, now that stays the same, that's still the past. And here becomes there. Whereas present perfect continuous, I have been working as a teacher for 4 years. That becomes she said she had been working as a teacher for 4 years. So there, all we've changed really is have into had. So she said she had been working, okay, have been working, had been working as a teacher for 4 years. That's the same. Okay, that's easy. Past perfect and past perfect continuous. So he had already finished the exam and we had been walking for an hour when it began to rain. When we're reporting it, they stay the same, right? But we add the additional information. She said he had already finished the exam. They said they had been walking for an hour when it began to rain. So it's still clear that you're using reported speech because you use she said or they said or he told them, for example. But the verb tense construction stays the same. You don't need to transform it into anything else. Okay. Now let's move on to the future tense. I'm going to go to the party. She said she was going to go to the party. We will play tennis tomorrow. They said they would play tennis the following day. That can be a little bit of a tricky one for some English students, so be careful with that one. We will be playing tennis tomorrow. They said they would be playing tennis the following day. I will have finished work by 4 p.m. She said she would have finished work by 4 p.m. You may hear people say she said she will have finished work by 4 p.m. Now that is if you are reporting that conversation before 4 p.m. So it's still in the future at this point. Okay. But if you're talking about it the next day, you would say she said she would have finished work by 4 p.m. Okay, let me go through that one again. If Sally says, I will have finished work by 4 p.m. She says that at 10 a.m. She's talking about her work day that day. If you are talking to your friend and you're reporting what Sally has said to you, but you're doing it at midday on the same day, you could say, Sally said she will have finished work by 4 p.m. because it's still in the future at that point. However, if you are reporting your conversation with Sally the next day, then you would say, she said she would have finished work by 4 p.m. I am leaving tonight. She said she was leaving that night. Okay, remember, tonight is for the day that you're speaking. That night can be any day after that because you're referring back to that day. Expressions of time and place for the future. Here are some of the most common. Tomorrow becomes the next day, the following day. This can be a little bit tricky. You have to think about when the direct conversation took place. And you have to think of the relationship between that conversation and the point in time that the person was talking about. Okay? So let's get some examples to make it a little bit clearer. If your friend Brian is talking to his brother Todd, and he said, I'll pick you up from work tomorrow. Maybe he said that on Monday, so he was talking about Tuesday. I'll pick you up from work tomorrow. Later that day, or any time afterwards, you can report that conversation as Brian told Todd he would pick him up the following day. You could say Brian told Todd that he would pick him up the next day. Or Brian told Todd he would pick him up that Tuesday, if you want to be specific so that there's no misunderstanding. That can help as well. Now, we had a little bit of a look at auxiliaries earlier when we were talking about perfect and perfect continuous tenses. And now we'll focus on some modal auxiliaries. So words like must, should, could, would, might, have to. In our direct speech, if we say I should study for the exam, in reported speech, the should doesn't have to change. He said he should study for the exam. Equally, might, would and could can stay the same, but we signify the reported speech with the other phrases. So, it might rain becomes the weather forecast said it might rain. Have to, however, is used in the present and the future, but in the past, it's had to. I really have to finish my project today. She told me that she really had to finish her project that day. The last example here is, if the pool is open, we can go swimming. Now, can and may in direct speech are transformed to could and might in indirect speech. He said that if the pool was open, we could go swimming. Okay, so we've covered a lot of the main points. I've gone through a lot of different things with you here. So we're kind of running out of time now. So what I will do is ask you to write any questions that you have in the chat box. I will either directly respond to you, or if I feel like it will be beneficial to the group, I'll respond in the group so that everyone can read your questions and my answers. So it's been a pleasure to show you a few snippets of the reported speech course today. I recommend that you take a look at the Intrepid English Academy. We've got many courses in there on a range of different topics, from general English, grammar, exam preparation, business English, pronunciation, all kinds of things. There's a new course coming every month, so please look out for our live events that will show you what we're offering in the Intrepid English Academy. We're always available to answer your questions, so please come and say hello. We'd love to meet new students and English learners. We've got lots of freebies on our website as well. So if you're not interested in signing up, you can download ebooks, you can read our blog, listen to our podcast, and get involved in some competitions that are for non-members, as well as lots of lovely competitions for members. You can win badges which give you extra points that you can use for free English lessons. So coming to our community, to our academy, really pays. We hope to see you there very soon. Thank you so much for watching this today, and I look forward to speaking to you again in the future. Thanks.